Welcome to the studio. I'm Cindy Harrison and I'm going to be bringing the Christmas tag project to you today. Here is the Christmas tag. It's made with manila tags, 4 3/4 by 2 3/8. You can pick them up at your local office supply store, craft store, Walmart, just whatever would carry some office supplies. I like using two. I have one for the front and one for the back. It makes it more firm. You'll need some canvas paper. I use a little brad for the center. I have some 1/8 ribbon, 1/2 inch lace, and a couple different napkins, and a rubber stamp for the music. I'm going to show you how to use decoupage the napkins on, and if you don't have a napkin, you can use a border stencil if you have one. If not, do some scroll work, it'll be just fine. If you don't have a rubber stamp sheet music, you can go and take some sheet music and decoupage that on, and again, be just fine. The versatility of this particular design is that you can make it into an ornament like I did here, or you could even make it into a Christmas card. I hope you enjoy this project, so get out your surface and your supplies and let's get started painting. Okay, you have your tags ready. We're going to take our 3/4 inch wash brush and we're going to take out a puddle of antique white and light buttermilk. Put those on your palette. You can actually go in 1/2 and 1/2 between the puddle. Work it a little to the right, a little to the left, so it's kind of blended. And then you're going to slip slap this color on here. Your tag will curl a little bit, but it will straighten out when it gets dry. I'm trying to keep the antique white to the outside, but it's okay if you get a little bit on the inside. Oops, see, like I just did. If you want to actually go and do 2 applications, do one, let it dry, then go back and put on the second to make sure that you have the whole thing covered. You can do that as well. So I'm going to let this dry, reevaluate, make sure I covered up my manila tag so there's not a lot of yellow showing through. And you're only doing one side of each because we're going to glue them together. Go ahead and do that, and then I'll see you when you're done. Now that these are dry, let's put one of them aside. We're just going to work on one. And if I didn't mention before, I put my tags on top of the paper towel so that it creates friction and less apt to slide around. And also the paint collects on top of the paper towel and not on your tabletop surface. We're going to work on the background, and what we're going to create now is the music notes. And I have a rubber stamp, a block stamp that has music notes on it. If you do not have this, you can use words. If you have a rubber stamp that has words on it, or a stencil of music notes, a stencil of words, something to break up the background and give it a little bit more character. I also have a piece of foam that I cut from packaging material. Sometimes you get products like electronics in a box that is filled with some sponge. So cut it up and save it and use it for things like this. Next is going to be our shale green. We're going to put some of that out. take your sponge, dry, wet, or otherwise. If you did wet it, make sure you get all the moisture out. Pick up some of that shale green. I'm going to pounce it so I get a good coverage all over the bottom of my sponge. I'm not worried that I have angles because I'm not going directly onto my piece. If I was, I'd want it to have roundness. And I'm going to just pounce this color right over top. Keep picking up as you need and keep going back over what you put on there to keep it moist. I'm only going to do about 2.5 to 3 lines. Take it, turn it over. I like doing it on a diagonal. I'm going to place it right down and press as evenly as possible, and then lift. And you see how you see those lines? Now all you have to do is go to your sink and wash off the acrylic paint. You can use a fingernail brush to wash it off, or you can use your sponge. Next we're going to put on our gold trim. I got this gold trim from a holiday napkin. I tore off the section and I decoupaged it on. If you do not have a holiday napkin that has a gold trim like that, go find yourself a rubber stamp. This is a rubber stamp. Or a stencil, like a Rebecca Bear stencil. She has some really nice swirly trims. That you could put right down. I don't know if you can see it very well, but you could put that trim right down that side. So I'm going to use my napkin, and if you've never done napkin art before, napkins come in multiple plies. They could be 2, they could be 3. You probably could even get them in 4-ply. This one is going to be a 3-ply, and the reason I know this is because when you pull off the first ply, usually the first ply is easy to get off, but it's still white. You still see a lot of white. So you need to get the next one apart, and sometimes it's harder to get apart than the first ply was. So what you do, if you can't get it apart that way, take some masking tape, 2 little pieces, and you roll it in itself. You roll this one onto itself. So now you have 2 pieces of masking tape. Stick one on this corner, stick one on that corner, and then you start to pull it apart. See? That's how you get that taken care of. To see the difference between this section and that section, that's why I knew there was another ply of white there. So keep in mind when you're pulling your napkins apart. Now I want to take an area that's going to have as much gold as possible because I don't want the red and green in there. Those aren't the colors I'm using. Now you can use the corner. So let's tear off. I think I'll use a corner this time. I'm going to tear it off. Tearing is always better than cutting. It's more pleasing to the eye, more natural looking, and it kind of lends itself in and out of a design versus a straight edge. A straight edge will draw your eye toward it rather than be part of the back. So let's see. I think, yep, that's about good. I'll just tear it off right there. Now you can go this little medallion thingy at the bottom. I can choose to use it or not. If I do, I can put it up here like so. And yes, I have straight edge here, but I can cut that off or I can tear it off, however I wish to do. I do want to get rid of some of this red up here. Okay, don't want any of that showing. I think I'm going to go straight design. So take out your decoupage, and this is a formula specifically for napkins. I find this to work best on napkins, whereas using regular mat sometimes would tear my napkins if I overwork them with the brush. This one, I have not experienced any tears of the napkin with it. So take some of that out. Use an old brush that has seen its better days. And I'm going to take some of my decoupage and just put it right down the left side of my tag. I'm going to place my design on the tag and go right over it. So now that's on top of there, right? You can tear this off, or you wait till it dries and then you can cut it off. But see how easy that tears right off now? Note that if you're working with a napkin that has a white background, then the napkin becomes transparent, meaning you can see through it, you can see the design, what you painted through it. As you can see here, you can still see the music notes and bars. The next thing I did was I found another napkin that had little pine boughs on it. So what I did was tear that out and decoupage that on. Well, this napkin is probably going to be a little harder to find than the other one. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how to just paint your own pine bough on, and then you won't have to worry about trying to find a napkin with a pine bough. But let's set this up, let that dry, and then come back. Okay, now that this is dry, and as you see, it's less remember when we first painted it, it started to do that. So now it's more flat. Okay. I want to add some coloring around the outside edge to warm it up, kind of antique it a little bit. And that can be done with raw sienna. For that, I'm going to use my 3/4 wash brush. And if you're not familiar how to side load, I have water. Put some clean water in your brush. Can you see that glare? Take your piece of paper towel and you stick it on the paper towel until the glare soaks away. As soon as you see it soak away, you turn it over and you do it again. And that's supposedly the right amount of water. It will depend on your atmosphere, if you are a time of season, if it's drier in that area in your home, or if it's more moist. It really is, depends on a lot of different variables. So what I did was I loaded it up on the corner of my brush, wipe it into a small puddle, turn it over, make sure the paint is facing the center, and I keep going back and forth. Start, if you're on the left with the paint on the right, you start outside the puddle, walk it to the right. If you're on the right side of the puddle, start to the right, walk it left. I know. It's a lot to remember, doesn't make sense necessarily right at the moment, but after you've worked it a few times, it will. I'm going to go up the side, down this side. I can go across the bottom. If you want a nice gradation, sometimes it's better to work with a larger brush. Some people are afraid to work with a larger brush, but really that will give you a wide softening of color. And as you can see, I'm going back and forth and I'm walking it up. I plan on putting some ribbon and lace here on the bottom, so I want it to be above the ribbon and lace. When that's dry, pick up some more, across top. Go down the side. If you are comfortable with mopping, you can go ahead and use your mop. I'm going to blow dry that so that I can do the next side. I know that the napkin picked up some of that raw sienna, but I'm going to be covering that part. See how it covers that area? So I'm not too worried about that at this time. If you go over it with decoupage, you're sealing the napkin so it won't absorb too much of the paint. This kind of gives it a nice little antique look. Let's put this aside now to dry, and we're not going to go right to the pine bough until we have an idea where we're putting our poinsettia. Okay, now take out your canvas paper, and really this is just, it's a piece of canvas, loose canvas. You can get a canvas pad, and if you cannot get a canvas pad, then what you can use is watercolor paper, works fine, media, mixed media paper, heavy cardstock, even your manila folder, repurpose, recycle. Something firm. Anything that's firm will work, yet pliable. So what we're going to do is trace on your petals and your leaves, base coat your petals with terra coral, and base coat your leaves with jade green. Might take 2 to 3 coats to get them covered, but go ahead and do that, and then I'll see you when you're done. First shade on our petals after we base coated them with terra coral is going to be tomato red. That's going to be the shade on all 3 sets. I'm going to load my number 10 flat with some of the tomato red, and I'm doing what is like a C stroke So if you start on a chisel and you flatten and you end on a chisel, I'm not twisting the brush. I'm starting with it firm and I'm keeping the same position of the brush in my hand. I'm just moving my hand. Does that make sense? So I put my hand down. Do not move the way the brush is in your fingers. Just move the brush on the surface. So if you need to practice that a few times, go right ahead. But I'm going to load my brush and do that kind of motion, keeping the brush flat and making the C stroke and walking it up. If you go over on the canvas, it's not going to be a big deal because you know you're going to be cutting these out anyway. So again, start on a chisel, flatten that out, come back up on a chisel, walk it to make it a little thicker. And I'm not working it out so much on my palette because I'm working it out more on the piece, on the canvas. So do that on all of them. You can get wider on the bigger ones. So if you want to go to a bigger brush, you can. If you get a little bit liney, just go in and mop it out. So do that on all of them and then come back. Okay, now on some of these I'm going to go, these ones not so much. That's going to be the way they are. But on this one here, I'm going to take my side load and I'm going to bring it down a little bit longer. And it's not necessarily critical on which side you choose, but you choose one side. I start on the chisel and then I make it thicker, or I start thicker and end on the chisel. Either way. On this one, again, start on the chisel, make it thicker, and you just pick one side. You don't do both that high, just one side goes higher or out further than the other. This one I'll start from inside that little peak, make that thicker, and I'll do the same over here on the bottom of that one. On this one we'll go back and we will add little center areas, and I'm going to put my brush down and then I'm going to twist my brush. So when I put my brush on the surface, I start flat and then I twist it sideways. I'll show you again. Starting flat. I am on a little bit of a diagonal. These are small leaves and I'm trying to keep my whole brush on the leaf, but you are cutting this out, so you start flat and then you twist and bring that water edge of the brush over to the peak, this being the peak. So you start with the flat and you bring the water edge of the brush over to the peak. I'll show you on this one. Water edge is on the outside of the leaf. Start flat and swing the water edge around to the peak. It might take a little bit to get used to that motion, but that's what it is. I'll show you again. So I'm going to start flat. I'm also not cutting the leaf in half, or the petal I should say. If you need to put a pencil line, you want to make it curved. You're not cutting the leaf directly in half. You want it to be curved. So if that helps you, do that. But I'm going to start flat to that line, and I'm going to swing that water end around to the peak of the leaf. So flat and swing it around. If you get too much of a line, go back in and just tap it in, soften it out with your mop brush. Keep in mind the dark is on this outside, right? The part of the brush that has the paint is to the left. It stays to the left of that center line. So you're going to have dark, light, dark, light. You see how I did that? So if it's on the left, if you cut the leaf in half and it's on the left, it'll be on the left on that half as well. Do that on all of them. And then when we come back, we're going to reinforce A and B. Okay, now that those are dry, we're going to reinforce sets A and B with deep burgundy. Basically, this is a repeat of what we just did on A and B, only we're going to take a smaller load so as not to cover up completely your tomato red, but you're going to go in and deepen that shading. You don't go down as far, up as far as you did with the first one. And we're going to probably add more shading, most likely after we get it together, get all three parts layered. Some of the stuff underneath here won't be showing so much because it'll have layers. It'll be layered one on top of the other. Also bring a little bit of this color up here. And it's only on sets A and B. Dry that and come back. To set A, which is this one, not the one that looks like the letter Y, but more that one, we're going to add a final shading of the deep burgundy plus midnight green. We're talking a very small area, and I'm just gonna brush mix, pick up a little bit of the deep burgundy and just touch a little bit of that midnight green in there. It's not a big change, it's a very small change. That would be too much green, so I'm adding a little bit more burgundy. So on this one here, you need to walk it out a little bit more because, again, if this is on top of it, you're not going to see. See how it's hard to see, but it's under there. So if you didn't put on the tomato spice wide enough, you can go back and add that. More tomato spice. Bring this out a little bit. Go ahead and do that and then come back. Our highlight's going to be a brush mix of terra coral and light buttermilk. Same technique, it's going to be a side load. So you pick up a little bit of the terra coral and a little bit of the light buttermilk. If it doesn't show up, you go back and add more light buttermilk. This is the highlight on all of them. On the middle one, we're going to do it in the peak. So we start with the water end of the brush semi halfway down the petal, bring it up into the peak, the paint end of the brush, and bring it back down the other side. Again, if you feel that this isn't showing up enough, you go back in and add more light buttermilk to your mix. So halfway in, put it up, bring it down. Bring it up, bring it down. Make sure that the water end of the brush is starting where the shade ended. So I'm starting there and bringing it up into the peak, bring it down. If you put the dark in this bump, and in that bump you're going to put the highlight over here in this bump. Bring it into the peak and bring it down. Obviously you've got two bumps on that side. If you cover your shading, just go back in and lift off a little bit. Soften that out. Go ahead and do that and then come back. Go back with a smaller load, and you're going to go against and I'm doing chisel in, fade out. I chiseled in, turn my brush over, chisel in, and with the water end of my brush, fade out. This is on the opposite side of the center vein. I'm on a chisel. My brush is completely lined up with that line that I put there of the dark value. Twist the water end around to the outside, so now it is perpendicular with the center vein line. Start over here on the chisel, parallel to the center vein line, and swing that water end out again so it's, and then I'm going to wipe off with clean water any excess I don't want, because I'm really not sure that I want it going all the way in there, not that it'll show up because of the fact that we're layering the petals. Every single one of these is done the same way, so you can rewind as many times as you need to see this step. Otherwise, go ahead and do them on your own, and then I'll see you when you're done. Now with that done, we're going to pick up some straight light buttermilk, and we're going to put that right on our tips of our C set, the smaller ones. If these aren't showing up enough for you, go back in with that terra coral light buttermilk mix, but add a little bit more of the light buttermilk. You just do not want them as bright as this one. So you got to be very careful how much light buttermilk you make or put in there. They'll show up when they are against the tag, because the tag will be a little darker around the flower blossom. Be careful, it is milky, so it will milk up your shade value if you're not careful. Now we're going to do the vein lines, and they're done with the Terra Coral plus light buttermilk mix. And use your fine liner. I'm going to use my 10-aught, a little bit of water, some of that mix, and you want to make it as soupy as possible. Start in the center, curve that center out, and then pull off of that center. Start in the center, pull off of that center. Do that on all of these. And again, I'll see you when you come back. Now, my Christmas flower here is definitely more on the pink side, but if you wanted your flower to be more on the red side, I would go and do a wash of cherry red over top. And what you're going to do, when I mean by wash, is you're going to mix a lot of water, very little paint, and you can either use your flat brush or you can use a round brush. Let's start with the round. We're going to put a lot of water. See how inky that is? Dab it out on your paper towel to get most of that moisture out. And then you're going to wash right over this. With this cherry. And that's going to create a more red rather than the pink. And if it's thin enough, you're not hiding your highlights or your shades, you're just tinting it. Go ahead and do that and then come back. Again, no worries in getting over the edge because you're just going to trim it out of there anyways. If you happen to lose some of your vein lines or your highlights, you don't like them to be as dark as they're coming out, that you can go back and add them again. But as you can see, these are more muted and these have a richer color tone to them. If you think that the cherry red is too pink for you, go ahead and have some diluted tomato red. And you can go right over everything with a diluted tomato red if you want that color instead. So you have your choice. So now you can go back if you want and pick up some of that mix. Have more of the Terra Coral in it and not so much of the light buttermilk. Now let's go on to the leaves. Take out some light avocado, and the same thing that you did with these petals, the leaves are done the same way, just with different colors. So either you can use your number 10 flat, or you can use your 3/4 inch, whatever you're comfortable with, and you're going to go and shade first the C stroke. Remember, chisel, flat, chisel. Then you'll go up one side of the leaf As you can see, I went up one side of the leaf and then you do the center vein. All done the same, just with different colors. So go ahead and do that, and then I'll see you when you get back. Always refer back to your color photo step-by-step chart, and that will help you to decide what side of the petal or leaf you're putting your color on, okay? If you notice, I have two veering pointing to the left with the shading on the top vein of the vein, and this one is pointing to the right with a shading. Okay, so you can manipulate them where the highlights will be up. We're going to shade this again with a little bit of the midnight green. Again with the side load, and do it in a smaller area. Not to cover all of your light avocado. Again, this is going to change when we start layering the pieces, and what doesn't show up we'll have to adjust. So bring that out a little bit, about halfway. Blow dry that. We're going to highlight these leaves with shale plus light buttermilk. So pick up some shale and then pick up some light buttermilk. We're going to do the tips. I start in the tip and I'll walk it down. And again, this kind of, because of the light buttermilk, will make it a little milky, so you want to keep, you want to wash it off over your shading so your shading doesn't get dull. Right now it's against a white canvas, so it might not show up nearly as much as it will when it's on your tag. I'm going to get a clean load, and then we're going to go up one side of that vein like we did with the petals. Dry that. I'm going to take the light avocado and bring that up a little bit on the downside. And then when that's dry, you can extend the midnight green a little bit further. Now with your 10-aught liner brush, some water, put it in the midnight green, make it a little inky. And we're going to do the veins. I always start back when I'm drawing them, go back to the center vein and walk your side veins out from it. So now we're ready to cut these out. So get your scissors ready, cut these out, and then I'll see you when you come back. After you have these cut out, if you have any of the white showing in the middle of these two, it doesn't matter because they're going to be overlapping each other, therefore you're not going to see the centers when these overlap. But what you will see are the edges and tips. So you're going to want to make sure that if there's any areas here that are still white, you're going to want to cover them with some paint. So whether it be the terra coral, I mean whatever's on your palette, whatever is there. This could be terra coral here, or you can touch it with a bit of the light buttermilk with a highlight. You can make that brighter. Now it'll start popping. If it's in a shade area, then you're going to want to pick up the tomato red or the deep burgundy, and you're going to want to deepen those areas just in case they come through. I like keeping the centers a little thicker because we need to puncture a hole in the center for our brad. If you plan on curling your petals, you might want to paint the back side. So go around and do all of those until you get it to the desired look. These now that we have the desired look, take your scissors or X-Acto knife, and what you want to do, or even a corsage pin. I have these big sewing needles, so what I'll do is I will figure out where the center of this is, and I will push my pin through it without pricking myself, of course. And you want to be careful you don't tear the petals. But that will be enough of a hole to get our brads through. Look at your directions for how they're placed, and you're going to lay that on there. So you know that one's up. This is B. B goes like that. And then C will go here. So place the pin in, and now you know where it has to go through all three of them. That's why I leave a little extra, because, and see how that close that is to the edge. So you may just be gluing them on. The brads I'm using are already in avocado green. You can pick those up at your local craft store, or there's a lot of online places that sell them. Put this brad through that hole. And that goes up. Next one is this one. in there. And then this one is A goes that way, B goes this way. Push that up in there. So there's your poinsettia flower. What you can do at this point, you push them down in. If you want to add if you want to add glue to it, you go right ahead. Slide that down between it, flatten that out. Now you can tell where you need to separate the petals. That's when you pick up your first shade on your petals, which is tomato red, and then you can lift these up, go in there and deepen that area. If you need to lift that one up or leave it down, whatever you choose, but you're going to go around that petal. This one you can go around this petal. You see what I'm doing? If it was a flat design, then I would be shading it in these areas. So that's why we're doing it this way. We couldn't do it before because we didn't know how they were going to lie over each other. Now we do. You can even pop up some of that highlight. Probably a little too much like buttermilk there on that one, so I will go back. See how I'm just adjusting? Just adjust. Now that you have something to compare it to, you just keep adjusting until you've created depth, putting the dark on the bottom and the lighter on the top. If on some of these back petals you want it even darker, pick up that deep burgundy and go ahead and put that in there. Like between these two, pick up that petal and add that in here, and then it will create more depth. But there you have it. You're going to decide where this is going to live on your tag. Don't forget, we're going to have ribbon or edging here, or not if you desire. This will determine where you're going to be putting your pine bough. Also, decide where your leaves are going to live. Remember, you have two that are facing the left and one facing the right. Even if you brought this one down here, that would be fine. You can do that as well and space them that way. So figure out where those are going to live. And then what we can do is draw in our pine bough with a pencil or a chalk pencil. You can have this kind of coming over the edge a little bit. either come down there, or I kind of like it over here now, but so if we bring this down, then I can put my pine bough right in here. See how that works? So now I have a position for that to live. Use my liner. I'm going to start with a branch of raw sienna. So we have our little branch coming from behind our Christmas flower, and then pine branches have little knobbies, so we can put some of those in. And I'll put 3 to begin with. I'm putting out a touch of light buttermilk, and if it's still wet, you can just tuck some highlight of the light buttermilk in there. And if you want to make a darker shade of raw sienna, add a little bit of the midnight green. Tuck little shadows in there. Okay, now that that's established, take out jade green, light avocado, and midnight green. Now we're going to go in with our midnight green. I like pulling lines toward me. So I'm going to be up on a 90-degree angle, and I'm just going to round them out. But they can also overlap and be pulled straight on. Because as your stem is here, if it's flat, they're going this way and they're going that way. That would mean there's none growing on the front of the branch or the back of the branch. They're just growing out the sides. If your needles are growing all the way around it, they're going to come from all sides of the branch, correct? So that means if you're looking straight at it, some of the needles are going to go right up parallel to the branch. Follow me? There are some pine needles that only grow on 2 sides, but a lot of the pine needles grow on all 4 sides or completely around. So let's pick up some light avocado and now build on that. Overlap is nature. You can bring these a little bit further out if you want. Next would be our jade. And it might not show up as much, but if you want to go back in with the midnight green, you can. And put that. Back on. But that's all it takes. Go ahead and pick out some ribbon. I found these at Michael's, I believe. Different colors and different sets of ribbon and lace. And I thought this went well right here. So I'm going to use that. And I also have a nice avocado 1/8 inch ribbon to go on there. If you have some craft glue that dries clear, that's what you'd want. I'm going to put this across and place this on here. And to press it in, I'm going to take my ribbon and go right over that and press that on. When that dries, I'll snip off the excess. In the meantime, let's place our flower on. And if I put him there, I will put this one over here. Let me tuck this little one up here. Go like that, or do I want it over here? Originally I wanted it down here, but now that I have the lace and ribbon on there, I'm seeing that over here is a much better location. See how that works? So after you have your leaves placed, hold those down and lift up your flower. Take your leaves and put a dot of press down. You don't have to do the whole leaf, but at least get the base of the leaf. Okay, so that moved. So now that we have those leaves down, lift up your flower and put a wad of glue there and press down. If any of that glue pops up, all you need to do is wipe it off. Now this still doesn't seem to be as light as it could be. You can easily remedy that by picking up again some of the light buttermilk and just going over some of the areas that you want to pop, even on the pink petals. And you can always go and do some more deepening as well with the deep burgundy. vein lines and you want to deepen those, go back with your liner. So basically it's evaluate after every time you do a new step. Evaluate and see if you need some areas to be darker or lighter, because you won't know until you assess what's next to it, because nothing stands alone. Everything is in relationship to something. So that's what it takes for it to pop. Then that's what you need to do. If you want this dot in the center, all you have to do is take the end of your brush, dip it in the terra coral and dot it on top. In part of your evaluating your project, if you find that some of these areas over here are too light underneath, go ahead and wash them with your midnight green, and that'll tone those areas down, or your raw sienna, either one will tone those areas down. On the back, you can choose to, I embossed this with musical notes and then I scrubbed it with shale green and some raw sienna. On this back I did the pinks and did a slip slap and added some gold twinkle, as I did on the sides as well. And because it's an ornament, I painted the parts of the poinsettia that were exposed. So you could do the same on this one. Paint the parts of the poinsettia that are exposed. I did do it on the leaves here, but I didn't do it on the back of the poinsettia. But easily rectified. So you can do that. You can always put a rubber stamp of music or words on the back if you want, if you don't want to emboss the paper. I have this embossing folder, so I put it through my Big Shot and I embossed my tag. If you can see, my tag is now embossed. And so let's brush some color over it while that dries. I'm going to take some shale green, and you can either do this with a large flat brush or you can even do it with a fan brush, whatever you feel comfortable. I'm going to load my brush up with the shale green, and now I'm going to be at a 90-degree angle to my surface, and I'm just going to wisp back and forth, hitting the highs of the design. And change your direction so you don't always you're not always going in the same direction. So see how that starts lifting the design. Another way of doing it could be to take a piece of paper towel, wrap it around your finger, load some of that paint up on the towel, and you can rub over it. Be careful because the embossing makes this very thin and it can start tearing. Now that we have some of that lifted, I'm going to go back to the raw sienna because now this just looks grungy dirty. So I'm going to pick up some of the raw sienna and then I'm going to antique the tag, just like we did on the front. Now, if you would like to add a little bit of color, go ahead and pick up some of that terra coral, and you can add some of that color to the back of your tag. You can add some of the green, light avocado. Anything that's on your palette, as long as it's on your palette, you can add it. Add some of the deep burgundy. So I have a little varied thing going on there. So again, as long as it's on your palette, it's safe to be putting here. We also have some craft twinkles, the crystal kind, and you can take an old brush and a little bit of these craft twinkles, and you can kind of brush some around the backdrop. You can brush them onto your petals, wherever you want to have a little bit of glitz. So when the light moves and hits it, it'll twinkle for you. I might have used some varnish with glamour dust, a very fine glamour dust on that one and on this one, whereas I used a gold twinkles on the back of that. Otherwise, however you want to decorate this, you go ahead and do so, and when it's dry, you glue it together, add a little book tassel, and you're done. Thank you for joining me here in the studio today. Hope to see you again soon. Until next time, remember to paint with heart.